Hey guys, welcome back. Tisha here, back with another Bridgerton review. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit that like button. It helps me in the algorithm. Let's begin. So this episode begins with Daphne banging on the keys as Simon is outside firing his weapon at these poor birds. Now, the good news is Simon is so upset that he seems to have missed most of the birds, so they're getting to fly away from this target practice. Simon and Daphne are still mad at each other. We see them sitting at the dinner table where previously they were sitting right next to each other. And now everyone in the household knows that something is going on because they're sitting at polar opposites. And their tables aren't normal, regular size kitchen tables. No, they're tables that are like something that you would see a Thanksgiving dinner at. So that is how far apart they are, as opposed to sitting next to each other like we previously saw. Daphne is so mad that she looks to one of the staff and asks them if they can please have her things to be removed from the Duke's room. And she does this in front of several people, which means at this point, there is no filter. I'm not faking it. This is how I'm feeling. Go ahead and get this done. He tells her no. Now, we know that Simon, in the beginning, when they first arrived here, said that he wanted them to stay in the same room. But because she's still upset about him lying about his abilities to have children, she don't want to stay with him, which you can't blame her. Like, normal people, let me not say normal, most of these marriages are not love matches, so they don't stay together. So here you have her feeling like she's in love with this man who's deceived her, and she doesn't have a desire to lay with him, and I wouldn't either. He's furious because now she has forced him to possibly have broken his vow, a vow that she doesn't even know about, by getting her pregnant. As they're sitting there going back and forth, Rose comes to the table with the latest scandal sheet, and she looks at it, Daphne does, and without even a minute passing by, she gets up with the scandal sheet in hand, says that they have to go, that to please pack her things tonight. So Simon is like, what's going on? And at first, she acts like she doesn't want to respond to him and tell him, but she lets him know that her brother has faced a scandal and she needs to go home so she can be there for her family. Daphne doesn't want Simon to come with her back to London because, in her words, this is a family thing. But he says, look, you said you want to stay in separate bedrooms. Okay, that can happen, but we will not be in separate households. And for a moment, I was like, okay, he's redeeming himself. He's letting it be known we may be in a tiff right now, but you're not going to leave me. But he basically threw all of that by the wayside, because the reason why he doesn't want to be separate from her is because he wants to make sure that he finds out the moment that she has her period. So clearly the honeymoon is over with. It's the next day and we're back in London, and everyone is receiving the newest scandal sheet. We hear from our favorite narrator. Ms. Marina Thompson recently, oh no, let me start over, because if we do one thing right, we're going to make sure that we get Lady Whistledown's parts right. Miss Marina Thompson's recent fall from grace continues to echo through every drawing room in town. Days after it was revealed her engagement to a Mr. Colin Bridgerton was nothing more than a sham. Of course, a lady's disgrace does not merely tarnish her own name. Like the tars of Thames, it also leaves a horrid smear on anybody nearby. Meaning, these two people, Miss Thompson isn't the only person who has something to worry about. The Bridgertons and the Featheringtons need to be concerned. You see Eloise at the Modiste saying that the scandal may tarnish her coming out, so there's no need to rush it. But Lady Bridgerton is like, look, everything is going to be okay. What I need you to focus on right now is to just smile, because this is going to go away. And Eloise is worried that a smile is not going to be enough, because she wants to defend the Featheringtons, because as a result of this whole thing with Miss Thompson, their reputation is destroyed. Do not forget that Eloise and Penelope are best friends. So, of course, she would worry about her friend. But Eloise needs to worry about herself, too, because as they're there in the Modiste, someone comes in, someone says hello, and you see them barely want to talk to Lady Bridgerton as she says hello to them. So they're not out the clear either. Lady Whistledown continues, while there is no parasol in the world strong enough to shelter a ruined woman, the fallen Miss Thompson can only hope she shall find a refuge somewhere. And we see Lady Featherington going from place to place, trying to find her a room. She's even at a place that says at first that they don't have space for her, but then says, we can try to figure out something as long as you donate money, because you do have money, which means they're screwed, because as we know, the Featheringtons are broke. Colin is seen with his mother and his brother as they discuss things. He says that he wants to check in on Marina, but he's being told to stay far away from her. Colin's still not sure if this is true, because after all, this is a scandal sheet, which means some things may not be factual. But Anthony tells him that because Whistledown has revealed that she's pregnant, but she was pregnant before she arrived, right now, nobody is accusing him. But if he interacts too much with her, if he's seen too much with Miss Thompson, what will happen is people will feel like they have something to talk about, and they may feel like he had ill intent. Daphne arrives to let them know she's there to help, that the town will be so busy talking about her as well as the Duke's arrival that the spotlight will be taken off of Colin and put onto her. Colin storms off, and later we see Daphne check on them. They have an exchange where Daphne, because he seems hurt and he seems like he wants to talk to her and he seems like he loves her, Daphne agrees to accompany him to see Miss Marina, or find some way for Miss Marina and them to talk so that they can figure out what's going on. We later see that the Duke is back and he's fighting Will in the ring. And we can see that he's upset, much like Will can. Will says to him, you haven't been this mad since you got the keys to the dukedom, since you've got the title of the Duke, which shows just how much this situation has made him mad. It's crazy how a vow to a man that is gone is still standing strong in his mind. A man that also didn't care about him or show him any type of regard is still holding weight. Let me give you a little bit of their dialogue. Will says, I presume you won't speak of what happened on your honeymoon either. Simon says, nothing happened on my honeymoon. Will says, I cannot imagine your wife feeling particularly excited about that. Like, other words, what do you mean nothing happened on your honeymoon? You're supposed to have something happen on your honeymoon. Simon says, I suggest that you do not try to imagine anything to do with my wife's feelings or actions for that matter. Will says, it follows no reason or sense, does it? Simon says, what? Will says, marriage. And there's not a bloody thing you could do about it. Simon says, I took a vow. Will says, see what I mean? Fast learner indeed. Will sees that something went down with him and Daphne, but even as one of Simon's closest friends, because Simon keeps everything to the chest and doesn't share certain things with people, he does not know that he's not talking about the vow that he made with his wife. He's talking about the vow that he made to old Dookie. We see that Daphne's at home and she cannot sleep because she knows that Simon is not home. She hears someone coming up the stairs and she tries to peek out of her door and she sees that it's him. And she goes to close the door back, but he lets her know that I've already seen you, so you might as well come on out. She tells him that they need to make certain appearances to make sure that they stand strong for her brother, one of them being at the Queen's event. And she then says to him, you know, like, where have you been? Which turns into a discussion of their own. She says, where have you been all night? He says, I did not think you were concerned about my whereabouts. She says, is this truly what our marriage will be for the future? You out all night doing God knows what with God knows whom? He says, with whom? You wound me. Not 3 weeks since we were wed, yet already you imagine me disloyal. She says, is it such a wild imagining? We both know your reputation, Your Grace. It's clear that you find there's nothing left in our marriage. He says, nothing left? She says, it's what I said. He says, is it what you believe? Next thing you know, because the two of them can't have eye contact for long periods of time without it turning into something else. You see the two of them and they're kissing passionately. And she says, I want you, Simon. So you hear the heavy breathing and Daphne moaning, and you see him lift her up and he gently rests her on the stairs as she leans back, and he proceeds to go down under, if you understand what I'm saying. It's an art form, I tell you. Like watching them, I was like, okay, y'all better sell this scene. She climaxes and she holds his face as he looks up at her. And I was like, okay, the only thing that they're missing is a little bit of, but yeah. Anyways, looks up at her face. I probably shouldn't have said that. Y'all forgive me. But he looks her in the face and she asks him if they can go to the bedroom so they can finish what they started. And instantly, that's the end of that. Like, you went from this passionate scene where the two of you are into one another and she wants to satisfy you the way that you satisfied her. And now you just want to cut it all off. He lets her know that if she is pregnant, he will fulfill his duty to their child, which I guess means in his words that he's going to stay around and be some form of a father to the kids, but or the child. I don't know what that would look like. He says if she's not pregnant, they will remain married only in name, which means they'll live apart, but presumably he will pay for things. This seems unfair because to me, this is clearly about more than just sex. They love one another, but for whatever reason, Simon is going to be Simon. She says, this cannot happen. No, he says, this cannot happen. Do you understand me? And she says, yeah, I understand that we no longer trust each other. They both go to separate rooms, and that's the end of that. And I'm like, oh my goodness, how you gonna sit there and make this girl climax? Then basically pull the rug from under her and tell her that after this, no matter what happens, you're not going to mess with her anymore. Y'all would just be married for the sake of being married. I'm seeing a lot of old dookie here, Simon, and I don't like it. It's the next day, and Marina arrives to talk with Colin as Daphne remains a chaperone. She has the attitude when she first walks in, and it seems like she doesn't want to be there because she says she was summoned, which means she didn't really have a choice in the matter. Colin appears, and Marina admits that what Whistledown said was true. They go back and forth because Colin feels like he's tricked. And there are some things that are said there, but I want to highlight this. Marina says, I did not come here to be shamed by you nor anyone else. I did not know better. You may think me a villain, but I did what I thought I must. No one ever truly helped me or guided me in a different direction. I had no choice. I needed to wed, and you were the only man who offered me even a glimpse of happiness. Meaning, she's a woman, and she didn't have a man or any other options, So she did what she had to do. So even though in last episode I was giving her a hard time, in this episode I did feel a little bad for her, because you could just feel her despair. In a lot of the scenes, you could feel her despair. He tells her, if you would have just came to me and told me your situation, I would have married you without a second thought, because I believed myself to be in love with you. But now I see it is a lie, which shows that he would have been a man of valor and stood up for her. And it kind of in a way foreshadows what may come for her, but it's not going to be with him. We later see the Bridgerton family, including Daphne and Simon, at the Queen's function. The Queen approaches because she wants to make sure that Daphne is with child. Simon plays his part by letting it be known that they have been working on it. So he's great at doing what he does, and he can play the part when he has to play the part, which bothers Daphne. You later see Lady Danbury invite Daphne to a gathering for all the married ladies. Then as she's doing this, the Featheringtons show up and people are immediately talking about them. I mean, as they're walking in, you would think that they're pariah because of the stares and the whispers that are happening. They can't believe, this is what some of the people are saying, how they tried to trick Colin. And Lady Featherington approaches and says this: my dear Lady Bridgerton, is this not a dreadful circumstance for us both? To have been so duped by that scheming hussy. To think that Miss Thompson would take advantage of my kindness after I opened my home to her. You must believe I had no idea of... And before she can finish what she's saying, Lady Bridgerton wants no part of it because she doesn't believe her. She turns around and she walks off while in mid-sentence. Of course, everyone sees this, and the Queen's right-hand man comes over to her, Lady Featherington, and tells her she should leave. She's like, but I have an invitation. And he was like, that invitation no longer stands. And if I were you, I would go, to basically spare myself a further embarrassment. So they leave. We later see Daphne attending Lady Danbury's event, and she is shocked at what she sees. She's greeted by Lady Danbury, who says, welcome to my den of iniquity. We find out that this is not just a place where the ladies are at, but it is a place where the ladies are letting their hair down. They are gambling in a room and they are drinking. So we see Daphne as she drinks and she enjoys her time with the ladies. It was interesting to me that her mother was invited. You all let me know down below why you think that is, because this is for women who were married. Obviously, Lady Danbury isn't currently with husband, nor is Lady Bridgerton, because her husband has passed. The Viscount has passed. But why wasn't she invited? Just something I was wondering. If you think you know, put it down below. Or if you know, put it down below. Because some of you have read the book. She sees that some of the women are married with titles, but they don't have their men there. And as a result, she's keeping in mind this is something that she may face. So she meets the wife of the general who might be able to help Marina. Daphne realizes that in Marina's situation, kind of because of what Daphne is going through, that she was just trying to do what was best for herself. And she lets her know this later. So she vows to use her title to contact the general, who is married to her new, gambling friend that she met, and locate George, who is in Spain. Marina is optimistic at first when Daphne tells her this, but then she changes it when she finds out that Daphne was the only one that signed the letter to the general, that she did not get the Duke of Hastings to sign it as well, because a duchess doesn't carry the same type of weight as a duke, which means Marina feels like it's going to mean nothing. Because if we don't know anything else of this time period, we know that women are not valued, not even duchess, when it comes to this type of matter. Marina kind of gives up after this because she has no rank. she has no protection, and all those things in this society matter. We later see her go downstairs to the Featherington kitchen. She grabs a whole bunch of different things, herbs and stuff, and makes some type of concoction. I think she was trying to remove what's in her womb, if you understand what I'm saying. I don't think she was trying to unalive herself. At the end of the episode, we see that Penelope finds her. She's passed out on the floor, kind of limp, but I feel like at that point initially she was alive because she grasped Penelope's arms, but then she's not responsive. At some point in the episode, because all this different stuff is going on, we see Lord Featherington approach Will. Lord Featherington has decided that he wants to fix a boxing match to help with his money problems and earn enough money for not only his daughter's dowries, but to, get from being in the red. Will says his honor is not for sale. And then you hear this. There is a reason your backers are dwindling, Mr. Mondridge. You're a performer, mere entertainment. We are happy to trade wages on the outcome of your fists, but no gentleman will ever see you as a respectable man of business. I know you have a fighting spirit, passed down through your father, no doubt. He was a soldier, yeah. Managed to flee the colonies after serving in Dunmore's regiment. Do you think he sought his freedom, all for his future son to become some exhausted fighter stumbling into the ring to put food on the table for his family? Next thing you know, Lord Featherington must have hit something, because Will slams him against the wall, pins him up, and says, "You don't speak of my father." He says, I apologize. I only mean to say, I'm doing this for my family too. Look, one simple arrangement, and both of our problems will be resolved. I merely ask that you have a think on it, at the very least. And he leaves his card on the table, happy that he wasn't pulverized. How do you say the word? He wasn't beat up by Will. It's interesting that he has so much to say about Will's situation, but he's not in a better position himself because he owes a lot of things to various creditors, and they are in debt. We see Simon and Anthony sit across from each other as Anthony spots Sienna and says he needs more drink. Remember, Madame Delacroix said that she was gone, but here she's back, and she's perusing for a man. Simon and Anthony argue with each other. They say different words to each other. Anthony tells the Duke, what is most unfortunate is that your father was so absent that he never gave you the proper example of how to lead a household, because he could see something's off with Simon and his sister. So he's kind of making digs at him. And the Duke lets him know that with the way that Anthony struggles, he's not making it, seem like he's much better off, even though he had a father. And then you hear the Duke say this. Well, you certainly make it look difficult with your constant struggles. You fulfilling the promise that every firstborn son makes to his father after he dies. Do you think he's looking down on you now? Ashamed, mortified at what you've done? I wonder, what would the former Viscount say? And he says it in a real cunning manner, it's like, oh, these are fighting words, and they work, because the next thing you know, you see Anthony get up and he punches Simon, and they're throwing bows, and they breaking tables, punches left and right, and Simon is standing up while he's bleeding, and he's smirking like he wanted this. He wanted a fight. Because both of these men have daddy issues. Now for different reasons, of course, and we'll find out more about Anthony later on. But that is just the truth of the situation. Back at home, the Duke is bleeding. He's cleaning up himself because Anthony messed him up, or maybe some glass did, I don't know. Daphne comes in and sees him And he says, the fight with Will, it just got too rough. So she says, I'll help you. So she cleans him up. And as she's cleaning him up, they lock eyes. And whenever these two lock eyes, it's going to be some form of something because they love each other. So they begin kissing. She then says to him, "Why won't you unfold yourself to me? A child would be a blessing," which of course kills the mood. Eventually, Simon comes clean and he explains, "I swore a long time ago that I would never sire a child. My father cared more about the continuation of the Hastings line than anything in the world. More than my mother, more than me. And so I made a vow that his efforts would be in vain, that the line would die with me." She says, "So this is all because of a vow? You made a vow to me too. Or has our wedding day slipped your mind?" He says, "I told you." She says, "You told me that you could not have children. You did not tell me that it was some token of revenge against a man who no longer walks this earth." He says, "I swore to him on his deathbed." She says, "And you betrayed me in our marriage bed. Let me be certain I understand. You will neither have children, nor the happiness we could have together, because you promised your father you would not." He says, she says, "Say it. Say it." "It cannot be undone," he says. She says, "I thank you for your elucidation, your grace. If your hatred for your father outweighs any affection that you might bear towards me, then you are right. It cannot be undone." She starts to walk off. She says, "My courses are due within the next few days. You will know then which vow you have broken and how we are to spend the rest of our lives, miserable together or perfectly happy apart." So Daphne is over it, all the way over it. And her attending that soiree, that gathering at Lady Danbury's home, shows her exactly what her future could be like. She could be a mother with an absentee father, like what the general's wife has. She could be a woman who's married only in title, like what the artist's wife has, because we know that he is a homosexual. There's so many different nuances. Or she could kind of be left like how, Marina is. We hear Lady Whistledown as she narrates, "Dearest reader, is anything more exhilarating than taking a gamble? For it is often the highest risk that carries the greatest reward. Yet, wager wrongly, and you might find yourself with nothing but regret." As she's reading, we see Lady Danbury smiling as she takes a swig of whatever's left in the wine glass. We see Daphne writing a letter to the general, putting a seal on it and handing it to Rose, saying to make sure it's delivered to this address. And we see Will looking at Lord Featherington's card as if he's contemplating. She continues, "Of course, one can never know for sure whether a rager will make a fortune or ruin it, unless one chooses a more secure pursuit. But as the season continues, the biggest gamblers have yet to truly show their hand, which leaves gossip in short supply in recent days. In fact, this author can think of no other event that merits a mention," which pisses off the queen. Because the queen is reading this thing and she's like, "Wait a second, I had a luncheon and she didn't even mention my luncheon, so my luncheon wasn't worth mentioning?" She continues, "It is worthy of note, however, that the Duke and the Duchess of Hastings have yet to entertain callers together. Our newlyweds are no doubt still secluded in nuptial bliss, who could fault them? And who could be surprised if their diligent efforts are rewarded with a new arrival within the year? Meaning, they still kind of got Lady Whistledown fooled, because she's not seeing that they're having issues. She's seeing it as they're so into each other that they don't have time to entertain right now. As she says this about the nuptials and stuff, we see Daphne look at her sheets, and there's no sign of her monthly as Simon walks past and looks on. So let's get rid of all that heavy stuff. Eloise is convinced that Madame Delacroix is probably Lady Whistledown. Without an answer to give the queen is getting really frustrated with her, and she's like, you know what? You can't figure it out, Eloise, so don't worry about it, because I've hired someone on my own to investigate this this situation and find out who Lady Whistledown is. And once I find out who she is, I'm gonna stop her column, which Eloise doesn't really like that idea. Eloise wants Lady Whistledown to retract some of their statements and to fix things. She doesn't necessarily want Lady Whistledown's silence. So Granville, the artist, as we see them at a ball of some sort, later admits to Benedict that he's in love with this man named Lord Weatherby, who we saw him with. They go back and forth. He talks about how he's not honoring his wife, etc. And he tells him, you don't know what it's like. He says, I risk my life every day for love. You have no idea what it's like to be in a room with someone you cannot live without, and yet still feel as though you are oceans apart. Stealing your glances, disguising your touches, we cannot so much as smile at each other without first ensuring no one else is watching. It takes courage to live outside the traditional expectations of society. You talk of doing the same, but perhaps it's merely just that, all talk. And he walks off. Because Benedict desires to tell his truth, we later see him let his sister Eloise in on his secret, because him and Eloise are supposed to be on their way home, but they make a pit stop at the Modiste, which allows him to see Madame Delacroix, who gets in the carriage, and she too is surprised to see Eloise, which complicates things even more for Eloise, because Eloise thinks that Madame Delacroix is Lady Whistledown. Later on, we see all these different people at the concert. Antony looks on as Sienna is with another man, and he touches her. We see Simon stretch for Daphne's hand, and they're in the box, so you know they got money. And they hold hands momentarily, and then you see Daphne go, and she looks down, and she gets up and runs out. The orchestra is performing, and I'm telling you guys, the way that the orchestra performs along with the scene, they are telling this story in such a great way. Even when we see Penelope discover Marina, the orchestra is playing. So at this point, since they've been there, this whole relationship has been about whether or not this girl Daphne is pregnant and if she has her cycle. And she does while they're at the concert. So Daphne is in the bathroom. You see her grabbing tissue paper. She puts it underneath herself. Well, not tissue paper. It was more like cloth. I guess in those days they didn't have tissue paper. Some kind of cloth. She puts it under there, and it's full of blood. And as she's doing this, her mother walks in the bathroom and looks at her because she saw Daphne run out. And they embrace. And Daphne sobs as she's being cradled by her mother. And Simon stares off in the distance. It is a sad scene, but they did so good. I know this one was a little all over the place. There may be some things that I might have left out that you want to discuss. Put it down below. This had a lot of stuff going on in it, and I was trying to make sure I got some of the key points, because I think that it's important to acknowledge that this man who's not in love with this woman, the artist, Granville, is in love with another man, and he has to hide it. Hence the title. They're oceans apart, not because they're not near each other, but because they can't be with each other constantly, even though it's what they both desire, which kind of plays a little bit into Queen Charlotte. But I'm not sure whether I'm going to do Queen Charlotte next or whether I'm going to do season 2 next. I kind of wanted to go in the order that it came out, but we'll see. Y'all tell me what you think down below. Maybe I'll do a poll on it or something for people who watch Bridgerton. My hopes are to have the next video out by Wednesday. Don't hold me to it because it depends on how my other recordings go, but that is my goal. Okay, I know if I don't have it out by Wednesday, definitely Thursday. Okay, thank you all so much for watching. Until next time.